Hello everyone, welcome back to Seed Time and Harvest, and we want to thank you for joining us again. Today we are sharing sorrel. You know, we talked about how to grow sorrel, we talked about how to prepare it, and now we have an abundance of sorrel left over.
Right.
So we're going to talk about what to do with it.
Now the harvest is plentiful. The laborers are few.
That's right. We had a lot of sorrel, but not many hands.
And so, you know, there's an object lesson there. The Lord tells us that He needs workers.
That's right.
To work the field. Just like we had so much sorrel and it took us hours upon hours to get all that sorrel. But imagine if we have more hands out there in the sorrel. If we had all our friends here from Save to Serve come to our house and pick some sorrel and take some home with them.
That's right.
That would have been
had
great.
More than enough. We had a lot of sorrel, and we're thankful for that. You know, you just see as you work, the Lord, as you cooperate with God, He gives you a harvest.
And so it is, as in the natural, and so it is in the spiritual. Because as more hands make the load lighter, as we work together in ministry, we're able to reach more people for the Lord.
That's
Therefore, hastening the coming of Jesus. Wow,
That's right.
What a lesson, what a lesson. And so we truly did have a plenteous harvest.
Yes, and we were able to share. So you may wonder, okay, so we planted sorrel, we made our juice, and we still have so much left over. And the cold days are coming. Very soon we're going to have to pull up our sorrel plants, and we will not be able to plant sorrel again until the springtime, since it's a tropical plant.
Cerise, does that mean that we won't be able to have sorrel for all that time?
Of course not, no, because we always have extras. That's why preservation is very important. You know, you grow food, but we also have to eat during the winter. So for the time when you're not able to plant, you preserve so you can enjoy during that time.
Right.
And that's what we're going to show today.
And that's the same concept that we learn about the ant who is preparing for the winter, because you can't go out and harvest when there's nothing to be harvested.
And what scripture is that?
That was Proverbs chapter 6.
Okay, can we read that?
Sure. Proverbs chapter 6, verse 6 through 8, it says, "Go to the ant, thou sluggard, consider her ways, and be wise, which having no guide, overseer, or ruler, provided her meat in the summer, and gathereth her food in the harvest."
Yes.
So we can learn this object lesson of not waiting and going out and getting ready for the winter. There's a winter coming. There's a crisis coming. We need to be ready. What do you say?
Yes, I agree. Amen to
well.
that. And so let's get right into it. So aside from my blender, two of my favorite kitchen items are my dehydrator and my vacuum sealer.
Is that right?
That is right.
Why is that?
Okay, so what happens when we first got our dehydrator?
Oh boy, let me tell the story. So my wife, when we first got the dehydrator, she was very zealous. And she began to dehydrate everything in the house. And when it was time to eat, I said, "Where's the food?" She's like, "It's over there in the mason jars." I said, "Wow, you dehydrated everything. What are we going to eat?"
Everything. We had a lot of space in our freezer.
She said, "No problem." And she gathered up all the mason jars and started putting it in a soup.
It was good.
And lo and behold, all those small little vegetables plumped up, and they became plumbing. It didn't even. I didn't realize, if she wouldn't have told me that they were dehydrated, I wouldn't have known that these were dehydrated. That was a good soup, let me tell you.
And dehydrated, it's almost like a roasted vegetable soup. It's really, really good. And why I like dehydration, okay, say for instance you have this big bag, right? Okay. And you're going to put like 4 or 5 of these in the freezer. What's going to happen?
That's going to take up a lot of space.
Soon you won't have no space, right?
I believe you're right.
So even look at this sorrel. When we look at how big this is, after we dehydrate, it's a lot smaller, right? So you're able to store more. It takes less space, and you're able to get the most out of your space that you have available.
Okay.
All right, so let's get into it. Now, we have sorrel here, and of course, we have a lot of sorrel. What are some ways that we can preserve our sorrel?
Preservation is always good. So one way that we can preserve this sorrel is by just taking it fresh, putting it in a freezer sealed bag, and just putting it straight in the freezer. And that will be able to store for a while.
Yes, you can have your frozen sorrel, and you can just take this out, take half of it and, you know, you put it in the water, steep it as you would, and enjoy sorrel just the same. Now, this, it's not really practical if you have, say for instance, you plant a wide variety of things and you want to store a lot. You know, storing it fresh is not really practical because it's going to take up a lot of space. Okay? And we used to dehydrate sorrel. I talked about how we dried it previously in Jamaica. So what do they do there?
Well, in Jamaica, and also we've done it at the house, is what you do, before we got our dehydrator, we just put it out in the sun and let it bake in the sun for maybe a day or two. And we learned this, or at least I learned while we were doing that, make sure that you move them every once in a while, because as they touch and the sun hits them, they begin to mold.
Yes.
And so you don't want this mold.
Right.
So what you do is you just move it around every so often and let it bake in the sun. You do this for about maybe 1, 2, or
2 to 3 days.
Or 3 days.
Depends on how hot it is, where you are, and how humid it is. Because prior to dehydrators being invented, there was always the sun.
Right.
You know, so back home we would get our sorrel, we'll separate the seeds, we'll put it in out, not only the sorrel pods itself, but the seeds also to dry for next year's planting. But we would dehydrate different form of vegetables in this way. But since we have our dehydrator, the concept is the same. We would get our sorrel, we wash them, and we line them on the trays of our dehydrator. Now, this is a Nesco dehydrator, and you have many different varieties. I like this one because, you know, it's circular, it's not as big. You can put it apart if you want less space for storage. And it comes with, it's circle, and it comes with trays. So say, for instance, you have a lot of smoothie, and it's just you, and you have a lot left over, and you're like, okay, I mean, I don't really want to put it in the refrigerator because it may, you know, start fermenting, and I don't want to throw it out.
Right, it loses its content, the nutritional content right away when you put it in the refrigerator.
Yes, but you can enjoy your smoothie another way. You get this tray, you pour your smoothie on it, you plug it in your dehydrator, and you make fruit roll-ups. So that's a healthy fruit roll-up instead of going out and purchasing things like that. And our children, they love fruit roll-ups. Oh, yeah. So you can make applesauce. They
don't last very long in our house.
Applesauce, smoothies, blueberry and strawberry banana. And you blend it, you pour it on these trays. I think it comes with about 3 or 4. And you make your fruit roll-ups.
And you know, the wonderful thing about dehydration is that you're actually keeping the content, the nutritional content of whatever it is you're dehydrating. So that's why they're so beneficial.
And you're just taking out the water.
Right, all you're doing is removing the water from it. That's the only thing.
Right.
And so like we said earlier, once you are ready to use it, you add the water back to it if you want, or you could eat it dry, however it is.
However it is, just like
depending
apples.
on what it is. For example, if you're doing bananas, you could eat them dry.
Chips.
You can dry them even more to where they're chips.
Right.
Or you can dry them in between where they become fruit snacks.
Right. I agree. And that's what makes our dehydrator very, very beneficial for me. Now, when we dehydrate our sorrel, of course, you wash it, you put it on the trays, and you set it, depending on the brand that you have, it's going to tell you the setting to use. Here it says for herbs and spices, you put it at 95 degrees Fahrenheit. For nuts and seeds, it's 100. And for fruits and vegetables, it's 135. So when we get our sorrel, we're going to put it in here. The fresh sorrel, we put it on our trays. We're going to set it at 135 degrees, and we're going to let it stay. Again, I cannot say, oh, it's going to take 3 hours or 4 hours, because that depends on
the dehydrator, the humidity, the place where you live. So all these play factor on how long it will take for you to dehydrate it.
Right.
Generally, maybe about a day or so.
Yes, depending on what. I know grapes, you know, if you try to make raisins, those will take forever.
The more moisture is in the fruit, the longer it will take to dehydrate.
That's right. And now you want to make sure, this is very important. When we dehydrate, we get rid of the moisture, right? Because moisture will cause things to spoil, will cause it to get moldy. So when you dehydrate your sorrel, you want to check it, because it may dehydrate uneven if you cram everything in it. So when you go to dehydrate, make sure it's evenly spaced on your dehydrator, and you have to check to see when it's ready. Now you can do that by looking, but looking really, it's not practical. So you want to feel it. Make sure when you go to touch your fruits that there is no moisture on your hand or lotion. So make sure your hand is washed properly. And dry. That's right, and dry. So when you hear it, it's going to crunch. You hear the
Oh,
crunch?
I hear that.
Yes, you know that your sorrel is ready. And one thing you can do is you can rotate your trays also to make sure that the dehydration is even. And when it's done, we'll just separate them and put them in a bag. Because as you mentioned, we don't only want sorrel during the winter months. We want to enjoy sorrel throughout. So when they're done, this you don't really have to refrigerate because it's already dry. You know, there is no moisture, it won't mold, so you can put this in the pantry or in a cupboard.
So all you need is a airtight container. It could be a Ziploc bag, a mason jar, or whatever it is that is free from air.
Air or moisture.
Moisture.
Any form of moisture.
All right.
So throughout, you know, whenever you're ready for some sorrel, you can go ahead and pop them out. And the beauty about it is when it rehydrates, it'll go back to its original state. And, you know, all the same quality of the fresh sorrel is in this dried sorrel. So you don't have to worry about losing any nutrients. And it does stay longer. I believe it preserves longer than if you freeze it. All right.
And I agree with that statement.
We have one more bag. One more batch. Right here. And this is why I love dehydration. You don't necessarily have to use sorrel. This method can be applied to anything that you have grown and have in an abundance and you want to store until the next growing season. As we always say, you know, you don't stop eating when it starts snowing. You still have to eat. So you want to make sure that you have enough food preserved for a time of harvest.
That's right. So we want to make sure that whatever we're growing, that we're preserving.
Yes.
Because that way we will be able to enjoy and continue to enjoy, even though it may not be in season, you can still enjoy it. Now here we have, now we're going to transition over to the vacuum seal portion of it. And this is beneficial because this will actually suck up all the air from the bag and allow it to preserve even longer than what it already will preserve by dehydrating.
And this is the same brand of vacuum seal. You can use whatever brand you have available, whatever fits in with your budget. And it's very simple. It not only seals your bags, but again, it has a vacuum seal. All right, so it's very simple. You put it in and you vacuum seal it.
And as you can see there, it's sucking up all the moisture.
All the air.
All the air, because the moisture is already taken out. And as you can see, not only is it sealing it, it's also a form of conservation. So you have preservation and conservation. This will take up less space.
Yes. And would you believe all of this came from like 2.5 bags full of sorrel. So this is a lot of sorrel in such small space.
So that means, let's put them together.
More than half of that. More than, it's like 3 times that amount.
So 3 of these bags is equal to 1 of this bag here.
And that's why you see that it's so good for your conservation of space. Now you can vacuum, you can seal anything that you have extra. If you have leftovers and you don't want it to go moldy by just staying in the refrigerator, you can seal it. You know, if you have beans, anything like that, you can vacuum seal them, put them in the freezer, and you make the most out of the space that you have available. So there you have it, everyone. We thank you for joining us. And Joshua has joined us here on set. He wants to see what's going on. And we want to say happy planting and happy storing from seed time and harvest.
All right, happy planting, everyone.
Say happy planting, Joshua.